Good afternoon, everyone. We hope you're doing well today, wherever you are. My name is David Gellis. I'm a business reporter here at the New York Times and the corner office columnist. For the past few months, we've been holding these calls and talking to business leaders about their response to the coronavirus pandemic. Today, we're glad to have Joey Bergstein, the CEO of Seventh Generation, here with us. Seventh Generation, as many of you know, makes paper products, including toilet paper, and other home goods and cleaning supplies, and is owned by Unilever. Later in the call, we'll of course talk about how Joey and the team there has been dealing with the disruptions to its supply chain, a sharp rise in consumer demand, and other challenges posed by the coronavirus crisis. But on this day, there's of course so much more going on in this country right now, and we need to talk about all of that first. A quick housekeeping note. You may submit questions at any time during this event using the Q&A feature in Zoom. We'll get to them in 20 minutes or so. And please note, this event is being recorded, and this is an audio-only event. So let's begin. Joey, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be with you, David.
So at a moment like this, with a national conversation about diversity, racism, and police brutality going on, and the political situation being what it is, what's your message to your employees and to your customers? How are you as a CEO responding to this?
Well, you know, it's a devastating moment, and we're responding on many different levels. Personally, I'm sad, I'm outraged by the actions of hate and violence and racism that just seem to coming back and back and back at us. George Floyd is the latest example, but there's Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and sadly we can keep going on. And for me, it's really personal. As the son of a Holocaust survivor who lost her entire family, we know the impact of systemic institutional hate. And we need to speak out, but even more so, we need to take action. I personally stand as an ally with the Black community. I know racial issues are human rights issues, and it's time for us to both speak out and to take action, as I said. So for us, we've been doing a lot of work in trying to create an inclusive workplace over the last several years at Seventh Generation. But we know we need to go further, and especially now. So we're starting by creating space to discuss this with our employees, acknowledging what's going on around us. We started that conversation last week. We do a community huddle every week, and I opened up the one on Thursday to talk a little bit about what was going on in the country around us. We're going to continue that conversation this week, and we're going to create space for our employees to come together and have these conversations in much smaller groups. It's hard to do it as a whole company, but it really starts by opening up a dialogue and talking to our employees about it.
Yeah.
And then
well, I'll come back to it. You go ahead.
Okay.
Finish. It sounds like you're sort of giving us a broad overview on the company's response, which I know is multifaceted. You're doing a bunch of different things this week.
Yeah, so I was going to say, the second big thing is just the action that we take, and so we're taking a stance. We're taking a stance that systemic racism must be addressed, and to that point, the Seventh Generation Foundation committed $100,000 to the Bail Project to ensure that protesters and others who are incarcerated aren't paying a bigger price for expressing the hurt that they're clearly feeling. We're also calling on Congress for safe, improved access to voting, which we think is a basic human right. For me, that's also a personal one. As a business leader and as a new U.S. citizen, I know just over a year ago, I got my U.S. citizenship very proudly, and I voted for the first time in March. I know firsthand I wouldn't have been able to do that. I wouldn't have been able to participate in that election if I couldn't vote in advance, and recognize that that's the case for many, and many it's far more challenging than it is for me to be able to participate in the democracy. And we want to ensure that everybody has safe and access, safe and secure access to being able to vote. So a few things that we're doing to take stances to try to shift what's going on in the country, and then also carefully looking at our own business practices and how do we ensure that that we're addressing racial equity in our business practices as well.
Good. Well, thank you for that overview. I'd like to drill down just a bit deeper on some of that. You mentioned looking in the mirror, essentially, as a company, and looking at the diversity within the organization. Can you give us a sense of how diverse Seventh Generation is as a company, how diverse your senior leadership team is, and what efforts, if any, you're making to try to become more diverse as an organization?
Mm-hmm. You know, for Seventh Generation, it's an interesting company. We're a small company, now proudly part of Unilever, larger parent organization. We're based in Vermont, which is not the most racially diverse state in the nation. We started working really closely on inclusion about 5 years ago, and we started looking at gender inclusion. We actually have a workforce which is almost 70% female. And yet what we were finding when we took a look in the mirror some time ago was that we weren't seeing women represented on the executive team and our board and the higher levels of management at the same rate that they were, they're present in the country, let alone in our business. And we've taken a lot of action on that part. And we now have a social mission board which guides us, that's 50-50 male-female. We have a leadership team which is 50-50 male-female. Our leadership in general is more than 50% female. So we've made good progress in creating a space where we think that women can succeed. Racial diversity has been a bigger challenge for us, to be really frank. When we started our efforts, we were less than 6% of our company base were people of color. We're now at about 16% people of color, which is still not anywhere close to what we need to be as a company that really values diversity and knows that we make better decisions when we bring diverse minds to the table. And we're really working hard at how do we continue to both improve the diversity in the business, but also most importantly, create a culture of belonging for people so that when we bring people in with diverse backgrounds, they feel welcome. They feel like they can succeed and bring their own individual selves to the table in a really powerful way. And so for the last 2 years, actually, we've been doing mandatory training for all of our employees to give them first inclusivity training around unconscious bias. And last year we had everybody go through some training on exactly creating a culture of belonging as a critical imperative for us.
And I think it's important to note that Unilever itself, first under the leadership of Paul Polman, the previous CEO, and continuing under the new CEO, as part of its sustainable living plan, has made pretty serious commitments to inclusion and diversity, and is being very transparent with their metrics. So there's more information about that on the Unilever site. I've long tracked Unilever, and it's I guess encouraging to see that even with the transition at the top of that company, with Paul stepping aside, the values seem to be mostly intact.
Absolutely, and they're very, very committed to this space.
Yeah, you mentioned that you've joined with other companies in urging Congress to secure voting rights, but I want to ask if you're going beyond that and actually taking a position on who people should vote for. I understand, as someone who's covered the intersection of business and these social and political issues for many years now, that there's an understandable, perhaps, impulse by many companies to remain nonpartisan and simply encourage participation in the political process. But I don't think it's a stretch to say that at this moment, these issues, Black Lives Matter, have become political. There's no way around that. So I want to ask what your opinion is of President Trump and his response to this moment. And if you, as Seventh Generation, are calling on employees, on customers to vote one way or the other in November.
You know, we're not calling on people to vote one way or another. What we want is to get people to come out to vote. And we want to do everything we can to help ensure that there's as big a turnout as there possibly can be. We want to help ensure that people are educated on where politicians at every level stand on the issues that we think are really important. Obviously, there's right now, racial equity is the issue that is in front of us. It's an enormous issue that we need to take action on. But the policies that affect racial equity aren't just at the federal level. In many cases, If you think about what's going on with the police forces, these are at the local level. The mayors who hire the police chiefs, who set the policies that that get enacted at the street level. And so what we believe is really important is that people are educated and have the tools and the access to be able to learn where different politicians stand on issues that they care about. And so that's what we're working on, identifying how to make that information available to people as they go to the polls.
Okay. I'll point out and give you one more opportunity to address the president's handling of this issue, while also, as I said earlier, acknowledging that corporations have a long history of trying to studiously avoid partisan politics. So I just want to point that out, and I'll leave you with one more opportunity, or we can move on.
I think we can just move on.
Okay, fair enough. I do just, lastly on this, and I'm not trying to pile on here, but there is precedent here. You're a consumer goods company based in Vermont that's a B Corp and is owned by Unilever. Now there's another consumer goods company based in Vermont that's a B Corp and is owned by Unilever, and that's Ben & Jerry's. And
Yeah.
Ben & Jerry themselves have, in fact, taken very strident and overtly partisan positions over the years, including when it comes to this president. There was even a line, if I have this right, of resist pecan ice cream. And Ben & Jerry themselves have spoken out. And so I just wonder, when you think about your role as a CEO, when you think about the company's responsibility, how do you thread this needle at a sort of a broader level? And what differentiates the way they have gone about it as, again, another B Corp in Vermont, owned by the same parent company, versus the way you're going about it?
One of the things that I admire so much about Unilever is that they create space for different voices to be raised and to be heard in different kinds of ways. And that's not an easy thing for a big company to do. And I think Unilever is doing it absolutely brilliantly. I love all of the work that Ben & Jerry's is doing. We're really focused on the issues that we care the most about, and think that our key role is to educate people on those issues, help them understand what's at the core of driving climate change to the extent that we can, racial equity, and being able to arm people with the right information for them to be able to make their choice themselves. Our view is that we can't tell them, and it serves nobody well for us to tell them how they should think, because who wants to be told how to think? We want to arm people with information, let them make their own decisions, but ensure that they've got access to great information. I think that one of the things, if you go back to the election in 2016, that we've talked a lot about is this echo chamber that we all live in. And one of the things have been really passionate about is really trying to create a culture where we create space for different people to be heard on issues and in issues in the way that they see them. And we want to, as I said, create a culture where people feel like they can be who they are, not feel that they need to succumb to a certain way of thinking, but act on their values, which is exactly what we're trying to do.
Well, thank you. A reminder, this is David Gellis. I'm the corner office columnist here at the New York Times, speaking with Joey Bergstein, the chief executive of Seventh Generation. We're talking about the pandemic, the protests, and more. And you can ask Joey a question yourself in the Q&A feature on Zoom. We'll get to those in a little bit. I want to move on to the pandemic, but I want you to talk a bit more broadly. And I think you just flicked it at this in your last response. And this is, if you would speak more broadly about the role of companies when it comes to social issues like these, and particularly the role of CEOs. I'm not asking you to comment on a particular issue here, but Seventh Generation, of course, is known for sustainability and its environmental commitments, and you're clearly engaged in the events of the day right now with everything going on in the streets. But where do you draw the line? What determines when you speak out about one cause, but perhaps stay silent on another? What about gun rights, LGBT rights, and other causes? Is there an expectation at a certain level that you start taking a stand on everything, from your employees in particular, many of whom can be very encouraging of their companies to speak out on one issue or another? And how do you thread that pressure balance that pressure with the fear perhaps of alienating some customers who might not share those political views?
Yeah, well, I think it comes back to your values. It comes back to our mission. Seventh Generation is a really clear mission, which is about transforming the world into a healthy, sustainable, and equitable place for the next 7 generations. We use that really as a guiding star for the issues that we want to engage in. And I think it's really important that we don't engage in every issue that's out there. Clearly, there's a lot of things you could take stances on. We've been very thoughtful about where do we feel the need to take a stance as it relates to the mission and the kind of change that we're trying to create in the world. So you'll see us take real stances on climate and how we address the climate change, which is, I have to say right now, one of the biggest crises in front of us. At a different point in time, I might have said the crisis that's in front of us, but sadly, there's others that are.
It hasn't gone away, even with everything else we're all facing this year.
It certainly hasn't gone away. So we take really big stances on climate, and we're really active in that space. We do a lot of work in that space. So we feel like we really try to study and understand the issues. And I want to speak out in a way where we're speaking from a point of knowledge and understanding, and where we're able to not just talk, but actually put action to what we're doing. And so we really very much in both what we say and what we do, and we don't really talk about stuff unless we're doing stuff, if that makes sense. And so on an issue like this, we felt really deeply the importance in our company, both in how we handle our employees as well as how we go to the marketplace to create a more equitable society as well. So we feel we have to talk out on an issue like this. Gun rights is not an area I have any expertise in. I've got personal points of view, but I'm not sure that my personal point of view, without some expertise and knowledge and action that underlies it, is as relevant in that conversation. So I've withheld that. And if somebody wants to have a conversation with me about how we feel about gun rights, I'm very happy to have that conversation. But I don't think that's the place for me, just using that as an example, to take a public stance.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it sounds like you're going about this thoughtfully, and I applaud you for recognizing that, like all of us, like all companies, there's still more work to be done. On a week like this, I think this may be as good of a segue as there is into the other crisis that we are all confronting, still dealing with here, which is this pandemic that has been so devastating to this country as well.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we could all take a deep breath, and if you could sort of take us back in time a few months to the start of the year. I remember where I was when I read the first news report about this, and sort of wondered if this might be something that we all need to pay attention to. And I reckon you also remember when this pandemic first came on your radar. Of course, it wasn't a pandemic there, but this virus. It was just an outbreak in China, but it quickly started to disrupt business in China. What were the first impacts of the coronavirus when it came to seventh generation's business and the actual business you guys go about of just supplying the goods and products that we all consume?
Well, it first really became clear that there was a real crisis brewing in January. We had launched, just as background, we had launched a ultra concentrated laundry detergent in the previous year. We launched it in e-commerce. It's 75% lighter, 60% less plastic, 50% less water. And it comes with this easy dose cap. So it's the same number of loads you get in the big 100-ounce bottle, but squeezed into a small 23-ounce bottle. And this special cap, you just squeeze it, you squeeze the bottle once, and then the cap automatically doses the exact right amount for the laundry machine. And we've been seeing some great success online. This year, for 2020, our biggest initiative was to take this innovation to retail and to put it on store shelves. We're really excited about this, really trying to drive industry change, has a really material impact on greenhouse gases and reducing plastic, etc. Those caps are actually made in China. And so in January, when we started understanding that this epidemic was an epidemic at that point in time in China, we were working very closely with our manufacturer to ensure that we were getting our supply of caps and then tracking the situation as it got close to the Chinese New Year. And then, of course, when the Chinese New Year shutdowns were extended. And so we were really, it was really clear in January that we had a really big challenge on our hands to be able to get these caps that we put on the bottles that are all made and packaged here in the US. And so that was the first moment when we saw that there was a real issue.
Okay.
And I would say the second piece was in January, when there was 3 cases reported in Seattle. And at that point, we decided that we would extend the coverage of the inventory on our disinfecting products, because we suspected that there was going to be an increase in demand, but it wasn't anywhere close to the surge that we saw when March came around.
All right, well, we'll get to March in just a moment. Just a reminder, we're speaking with Joey Bergstein, the CEO of Seventh Generation, about the pandemic, the protests, and more. You can use your Q&A feature in Zoom to ask him a question directly. We'll get to those shortly. So let's pick up in March. I know just about everyone remembers where they were that week when so many things started to seem to change so rapidly. Walk us through it from the from the perspective of your offices. You mentioned that you perhaps anticipated some demand, but nothing like what was about to come. What happened?
Yeah, nothing like what was about to come. So early March, we saw, specifically the week of March the 8th, we saw a surge in demand of somewhere between 600 and 750% of what we would normally have as orders. So, 6 to almost 8 times the kinds of orders that we would normally deal with.
And let me just clarify, is that direct to consumer, or is that from retailers requesting inventory?
From retailers. We don't actually sell directly to consumers. So
okay,
everything we sell goes through retailers or distributors. So just a huge surge at the beginning of March in orders. And to give you some perspective, when you build a supply chain in packaged goods, you normally have about a 30% buffer to be able to meet a surge in demand. You expect that might happen for maybe 3 to 4 weeks if something unusual has happened. Nobody builds a supply chain to be able to respond to that kind of surge in demand. And so the team has been in, I would call it, a constant state of triage ever since. And we're still in that constant state of triage. And on the one hand, we're really, I have to say that as challenging as the situation has been, I feel really privileged to be in a place where we're able to serve a public need at this point in time, being able to provide essential cleaning and hygiene products at a time when people really need cleaning and hygiene products. It's a great business to be in right now, and it has nothing to do with the sales themselves, but the act itself more specifically.
Yeah. And to what extent were you able to meet that demand? I mean, 600, 700%, understandable if you couldn't get there overnight. What were you able to do? And where does it stand now, 3 months later?
Yeah, it really depends on the category. We sell everything from laundry detergent and dish soap and toilet paper, disinfecting products, cleaning products, diapers, wipes. And so every category that we share has a little bit of a different story, but in some categories we're selling 2.5, 3 times what we would normally be selling.
Even today?
Yeah, even today. And, overall our business is probably, it's almost twice the size of what it was a year ago in the last couple of months. And so we're working through it. We're doing the best that we can. The team is doing phenomenal work to really try to meet the needs of the public as best we possibly can. Okay.
You mentioned toilet paper. I wanted to call this event the Great Toilet Paper Crisis. My team wouldn't let me. What was it about toilet paper that made it so hard to come by? And can you just give us a deep dive on toilet paper for a few minutes?
Sure. The thing with toilet paper is, well, first of all, nobody anticipated the level of stocking up you would see on toilet paper. So I think that's shocked everybody. But you have to recognize that any of these paper businesses are they're very capital intensive businesses. These are massive machines that you only make money in that business if you're running your machines pretty close to capacity. So when you have a big surge in demand, it's hard to increase more than you're already producing, because you're generally producing pretty close to capacity. And so there were some shifts in demand from commercial into consumer, which enabled us some flexibility. But you don't have the kind of flexibility that you would normally expect to have in a given business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And have you been able to sort of catch up with the toilet paper demand? I think I still hear a lot of people sort of rejoicing when they're able to get some.
Yeah.
Are we as a country going to have enough toilet paper to get us through the end of the year?
Well, I think as a country, we certainly do. We're still catching up to demand, and we'll be in a catch-up mode probably into the fall. Okay. And so we're replenishing our safety stocks, we're replenishing our retailer stocks, we're replenishing store shelves, and really just trying to catch up as much as we can, while obviously meeting the ongoing demand. And that's even before you think about whether there's a resurgence in the fall. Yeah.
And you may have mentioned that you work with third-party manufacturers to do your production, so you don't actually run the factories yourself. Has that presented any challenges for you? Were you getting, were other people cutting in line? Were you having to essentially share resources with other people who were also experiencing surge in demands? And has it made you rethink at all the merits essentially of outsourcing manufacturing, or perhaps the need to do more of that yourselves?
Yeah, we've worked with our supply partners for a long, long time, and they've been really incredible partners. They're very committed to 7th Generation. They love what we stand for. We've worked really collaboratively together on our joint sustainability journey, helping each other get better. And their response at this time for us has just been absolutely remarkable. Every single one of them. We had one example of a third-party manufacturer who also makes its own branded products. They prioritized our hand soap over their own branded products because they recognized that was more of an essential need. And similarly, we've had other conversations with suppliers who are making our fabric softeners or fabric conditioner sheets. And we said to them, where they've got more essential products that they're producing, that those would probably take priority over our fabric softener sheets, and recognize that. So we really try to work in real partnership with these with all of our supply partners, and that collaboration has been great. The model we have, we think, serves us really well, and we continue to identify how do we continue to be more efficient, and clearly we're doing more work on resiliency for the future, so that we're able to respond more effectively to surges in demand as they come. Yeah. But for now, we've got a model that's working really well for us, and we're very committed to them.
Okay, just two more for you, and then I want to get to audience questions. We've got a lot of them. It's not too late, though, to add your name to the queue. We're speaking with Joy Bergstein, and you can use the Q&A feature on Zoom. We'll get to those in just a moment. Joy, talk to me about how sustainability is going to weather this pandemic, really. There's a lot of concern that in the midst of all of this, especially with so many consumers essentially having to be much more cost conscious, with unemployment being what it is, that environmental concerns are going to take a back seat, that people might go for the cheapest rather than the greenest product on the shelf. What's your early read on how that's going to play out over the next months and years from what you're seeing, both at the corporate level when it comes to corporate commitments, and also at the consumer level when it comes to consumer demand?
Yeah, sustainability, I mean, obviously, you'd be shocked if I didn't say that sustainability continues to be critically important for people. I think the reality is right now that people are most concerned about their basic health and safety needs for themselves and for their families. What we hear a lot from people about, our phones, one of the things that was going on, our phones were ringing off the hook. And it was the phones, actually. Some email, well, quite a lot of email, social, but phones in particular, people desperately looking for our products. People want to bring products they feel are safe for their family, that they feel confident are going to be good for their family, good for the world around them. And we're actively seeking out more sustainable alternatives. And so for me, that was a great sign that that there's still absolutely demand for sustainable products like ours. When we look at the research, Ipsos did a great research poll, and it showed that 80% of people claim they're looking and will choose products that are safe for families and environment. So, we're convinced people are really considering the things that they're bringing in, that they're using around their families. We're growing faster than the market itself was a good indication that remains the case. But I would say beyond that, the fact is you can't live a healthy life on a sick planet. And we really, even if sustainability isn't at the top of people's minds, it needs to be a conversation that we have, because COVID-19 is just a symptom of something else that's going on that's much greater. And it really is imperative that we take action to address climate now, so that we're not surprised by what comes in the same way that we've been surprised by COVID-19.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? COVID is just a symptom of something going on that's much greater.
Well, I think, we all make, we as a society, we make choices, and COVID-19, we live in a global interconnected world. This is a global interconnected pandemic. And in the same way, the human activity is driving climate change. Scientists, there's a real consensus that that's the case on climate as well. Yeah. And so we really need to take meaningful action to address climate.
Yeah. All right, last one before we get to audience questions. And I know this is something you've been thinking a lot about. And that's sort of, what does it look like on the other side? What is the new normal going to be? Where do we go from here? And I think this gets right at what you were just speaking about. You talk about sustainability, certain practices we have as a society, be it the racial injustice or the environmental degradation, are simply unsustainable. And we're seeing that in so many different ways right now. So right. What does the new normal look like for you in the best case scenario? And what are you going to do to try to get your company and your employees there?
Yeah, I don't know what the new normal is. I don't know that there'll ever be a new normal. I think we're going to be in this highly dynamic environment for quite a long time. And so the most important thing is that we help everybody identify how to be resilient and to be able to manage through crisis that's in front of us. So one of the big things we've been doing with our employees, throughout this entire crisis, our philosophy has been people first, and putting people and their families in front of everything, trying to create space, knowing that people are, we've got a relatively young workforce. 70% of our employees have dependents, many with young kids. A lot of them are homeschooling in the morning and working in the afternoon, or some variations on that. Kids are on calls with our customers, and that's happening time and time again. So, as everybody's working remotely and getting used to it, what we're really, I think, learning about is how to be resilient at a time of really dynamic change. And as we navigate through this, it's going to be critical that we continue to help people be resilient, be flexible, know our mission and what we're trying to achieve, but be able to adjust how they go forward to be able to deliver on that. And then, so that's a lot of the conversation that we're having with our employees. I think as a society, we're going to be investing trillions of dollars in infrastructure in the years to come to manage our way through this crisis. We need to make sure that we're making a clean break from fossil fuels and what's been our petro past, and realize that fossil fuels are over. The negative cost of oil that we saw at one point in time is more than just a signal. We really need to ensure that as we go through this time, that we're investing in sustainable infrastructure for the generations to come. And that's my greatest hope is as we come through this, that we're really making meaningful change so that we can strengthen where we are as a society as we go forward.
Okay, well, we've all got a lot of work to do. Let's get to audience questions, and we've got a bunch, so we'll see how many we can get to. Bill from Texas asks, and this is back to the first part of our conversation, Joey. As we've been painfully reminded this week, training to change culture doesn't work. How have you changed the onboarding and talent management process inside Seventh Generation to be more inclusive? So maybe just a bit more specificity around those inclusion training that you mentioned earlier in the call.
I think it starts with being really clear about what your goals are and being really clear with all of your employees about what are our values, what do we stand for, and what's the kind of environment that we want to be in. And you're right that it's not just about training, but training is really important. And creating a safe environment where people can call each other out when their behaviors aren't inclusive. When guys are interrupting even on Zoom calls, calling people out and just pointing out the behavior in a nice way, right? I think culture shifts when you talk about it a lot and people understand that it's a core expectation, and that if they want to succeed, that they need to be part of that story and behave in that way. We thought about training, we thought about being really clear on a goal of, when it comes to gender equity, ensuring that we've got women at senior levels of management on our board, and making the decisions that need to be made to be able to get to help people succeed and advance through the organization.
Okay.
So there's a number of different dimensions and things that we do, but it's really to the actions and the tone that you set as a leader.
Yeah. This is zooming out a bit more broadly to the question about, which companies take stands on which issues. And Leslie asks, why do you think some corporations are so hesitant to speak up for protecting our environment and natural resources? And listen, I know this firsthand for interviewing CEOs over the years, hundreds of them. Many of them have very strong, very passionate personal stances on this, and yet for any number of reasons, they have a hard time putting the full weight of their organization, the full weight of their corporation behind these values. What's your perspective? Because you speak with all of these CEOs and more as well.
I think that the market needs to put greater value on sustainability and creating a sustainable, creating sustainable business practices. And I remember in September at the UN General Assembly on climate, I was sitting beside a woman who runs sustainability for a big mining company, one of the biggest mining companies in the world. And I said, I kind of looked at her quizzically and I said, what does sustainability look like at your company? And she said, we had to divest our coal mining operations a few years ago because it limited our access to capital. And it really struck a chord. And you read what Larry Fink is writing from BlackRock, that when the capital markets start to value this and really understand that sustainable business is good business, then it creates a real dynamic shift. But until that happens systemically, people see this as a riskier conversation to have, because maybe it's not what their shareholders want to hear about.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And
I feel great that those moves are starting to really happen and materialize, and I think we're well situated for that to evolve in a quite a dynamic way.
Yeah, and I think here we have to give some credit to Paul Pullman, the previous CEO of Unilever, who among his first actions when he took over the company 10 years ago or so it was, he stopped issuing quarterly guidance. And that was a signal to the markets that he just wasn't going to run the company for the short term. So I concur. It's changing the market structure and what the market values that's going to allow those kind of changes to take place.
Right, absolutely. And also huge kudos to Alan Jope, who's coming in behind Paul and is doubling down on his belief and his commitment in this space as well.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people wondered when he took over just how deep the roots of the cultural change that Paul tried to institute had gone. And the early indications, at least, are that it seems to have taken root indeed. And I think, in talking with Paul over the years, a lot of that really happened at the board level. And it was very important that he have a board that really understood that as the succession planning took place, they were going to identify someone who they seem to have found in Alan, who was going to sort of keep continuing on this path for the entire company.
Absolutely. And, you know, Dave, if I could just build on that for 1 second before you go to the next question. I think it's worth saying that when we sold the business to Unilever in 2016, when they first came to us, the company wasn't for sale. We were doing really well. We were growing rapidly. We were just about to launch an amazing campaign, which accelerated growth even further. It hadn't happened yet. We knew it was going to happen, though. We had incredible patient investors, and there was no reason for us to sell the business. But when they approached us, what we realized was if we were to ever sell the company, the only company we could ever sell it to would be Unilever, because the values and at the time, Paul Pullman's commitment, Alan Jope's has extended that commitment, accelerated it, are so aligned to what we were standing for. What we realized was that for a company that believes in transforming the world in the way business is done, we could go from affecting millions of people here in the US to potentially billions of people around the world. And you know, and so for us, the fit was absolutely incredible.
Yeah. We've got two related questions from Andrea and Sue, and both of them are asking to what extent you believe these changes in demand that we've seen over the last few months are going to be permanent at some level. And I think some of that relates to volume, but I suspect there's also a product category question embedded in here. And it makes me wonder, are there new products, COVID-specific products, that you might be considering bringing to market? Are you is there a new demand for high-powered hand sanitizer, antibacterial soaps? Are you going to get into the business of making masks, which we clearly all need now? What new products on the horizon? Talk to us about sustain or changes and in demand and how sustainable, as it were, those might be.
Yeah, so I would say so we've got a whole range of disinfectant products which are effective against SARS-CoV-2, which is the novel coronavirus that causes COVID-19, and that has clearly seen an incredible surge in demand, and is a really important part of how we're going to grow the business in the future as well. When we look ahead, we do think that people will permanently shift some of their hygiene habits. They're going to be disinfecting more frequently than they were before. They're going to probably want to take these products with them when they are out in the world. We've seen a lot of interest from commercial customers, restaurants, even retailers for their own use, not just for the sale on their shelves, to demonstrate to their customers that they're taking precautions on their behalf to keep their stores or restaurants or commercial spaces clean and safe for them. And so we definitely see an elevation in demand on that front. And I would say in general, we'll probably see an increase in, right now we're seeing definitely an increase in people washing their dishes because they're at home more. Increases in washing their clothes because they're at home more and they're more concerned about the germs that they may be carrying around. And so those are the kinds of categories where we do expect increased levels of demand over time. And we're working hard on how do we meet those needs in new and innovative ways all the time.
Well, thank you. We've come a long way in this conversation, but I think it would be inappropriate not to sort of end where we began. And I just wonder, as another night approaches in America and I think more people brace for more protests, what you're saying to your team as we enter the second week of this unrest that was sparked by the killing. What do you say to your team? Yeah,
my message to my team is pretty simple, that we must do better as a society than we're doing right now. We need to address the racism that is in front of us in a real and meaningful way. That's about each of us individually. It's about us with our families, the conversations we have at home, not just the politically correct conversations we might be having in the workplace, but the ones actually at home. That we must really, not let this moment be lost but take real and meaningful action for ourselves. And right now, the most important thing is for people just to create space for people to have real and meaningful conversations, while we deeply think about what's the right things for us to do and where we take action, and then obviously moving swiftly to action.
Okay, well, thank you for being with us today, Joey.
Thank you for having me, David.
And thank you to all of you for listening in on today's call and asking questions. To find out more about our full slate of digital events, including the next installment of Corner Office Live, please visit timesevents.nytimes.com. Next week, on June 9th, a bit earlier than usual, I'll be joined by Chegg President and CEO Dan Rosenzweig. We'll be on again at 12 noon Eastern, not 2:30. And please subscribe to the New York Times. It's the support of listeners and readers like you that makes our reporting possible. We'll look forward to speaking with you again. Thank you all and take care.